So I tried to place an argument that if this entire, the way in which Mumbai is developing today is not retrospected and redirected, there might be a high possibility that some of us might be the next in line to lose their corner in the city. So up till now, whatever it was theory and understanding and drawing my own understanding from that entire analysis. But I had to back them with certain amount of statistical data, certain amount of numbers, I would say, which is when the consequences came into picture. So the 5 major consequences that I tried to identify because of these catalysts were migration, urban conflicts, inequalities, economic disparities, and space deprivation. So this part of my research involved a lot of statistical data, the study of that data, and drawing observations that talked about how a certain part of Mumbai is being pushed aside to make space for a very different side of people in the entire city. So what it backed my argument was that even though a city like Mumbai needs change, even though a city like Mumbai needs development, needs space to accommodate more, we need to be a little more empathetic, a little more conscious as to what are we letting go of in this entire process, and could there be a little more thoughtful way to deal with the entire situation. So now my third question is, Abhi, I have my research all sorted, but the next is, now I have my lens there, I know what kind of understanding I have of that lens, but whom should I applicate this lens on? So that's when I come a little step back to my research again, which is when I went to the communities of Mumbai. So as I mentioned before, occupation as a driving force was something which was very evident in Mumbai as well, in today's world as well. So which is when I came down to 3 major communities that are still contributing to the city of Mumbai through their occupation. First were the Kolis, the second were Agaris, and the third were Dhobis. So my third part of the research started with somewhere analyzing on a macro level these 3 communities and identifying the precincts where they live. So which came down to my shortlisted communities that I tried to study and the sites further. So the amount of exploration that this community allowed me to do in terms of my academic perspective, and at the same time their importance and contribution to the city, made me pick Dhobi as a community that I would want to translate or implicate my empathetic lens on. And the site that I chose was Mahalakshmi Dhobi Ghat, which is in Mumbai, Mahalakshmi. And that's where my research part 3 came into picture. So my design panels are something that you guys can go through when it comes to my design. What I'm trying to explain through this is how I applicated empathy in different stages of my design. So when it came to documentation, one problem that my site had is that the site is having a dispute, which is why I didn't have the data which told me how many Dhobis reside there, how many non-Dhobis reside there. So I had to do a manual documentation of the entire space. At the same time, what I tried to do was, apart from my observation analysis, which is something that I started with in my research, I tried to ask the people their own problems. So the argument that I tried to place, where my scope was unknown, that I will ask them what they need and answer the questions through my design, was something that I tried to do critically throughout my documentation. So it was me trying to question and trying to understand their part of the story. So in my concept, if you guys remember, I started with 3 lenses: to walk, to live, to belong, and I tried to translate them through accessibility, community, and inclusivity. So I tried to take those lenses into my design as a step forward. So since I have been highlighting that empathy was a fundamental in architecture and it has for certain reasons lost its importance, I thought in case of planning a macro level aspect of the entire site, why not deal with something which is even fundamental to planning? So which is where I included Kevin Lynch's elements in terms of planning the macro level aspect of the entire design. So, and I added my own, which is living. So these 6 aspects, it was like creating a city within a city. So it talked about how I could better their living conditions there in terms of nodes, in terms of landmarks. Now, the third part was that I have designed a very empathetic design for them. But how will it get executed? while the occupation is not hampered, because that's where the true empathy comes into picture, is that if I am putting an argument that Dhobi as an occupation is catering to a lot of commercial sector of Mumbai, for the time that the design will get executed, the occupation can't stop. So which is where I came down to a phase-wise demolition approach for the entire site. Now the site has existing water tanks, wherein, so they were the tanks which were traditionally used to wash clothes. They are not used anymore. So, but since they have a heritage perspective to it, I tried to understand as to how much of it could be maintained and how the entire planning could revolve around them, where the tanks still have their importance and existence. There's a little more space, there's a little more space for them to practice their occupation with the tanks and the machines that they have. So this entire execution first aimed at gaining the confidence of the Dhobi families. How I did that was at every stage, I tried to maintain a number which, so the amount of tanks that I maintained were more than the amount of tanks that I demolished. So it tried to, so these smaller interventions or smaller decisions that I took helped me somewhere place an argument that even though I am changing a situation for them, it's not a change which is an alien-like change for them, which is something that's still familiar to them. The second was to not let the occupation stop at any point, which is why maintaining the tanks was my first priority over demolishing the tanks. And at the same time, the third aspect was that maintaining the connect between the occupation and its people. So if you look at the entire site, there are two parts to the site. So what I tried to do was I tried to propose a design phase 2 where people could be temporarily displaced and they can still have their occupation on there. So they don't need to move out of the city for the time being when their redevelopment is happening. So in terms of design details, now as I mentioned that my scope of design was unknown till my precinct was finalized. So apart from macro level strategies, it also required me to plan a proper housing typology for these people, because right now there were 632 families, Dhobi families dwelling there, and they didn't have proper roofs to stay under. So which is something that I tried to plan through the design details. And if my panels are there put up, you can look at how I have tried to deal with right from having a proper material specification for them to construction details that would make them feel like living as a community rather than living in a space which is just made for them to practice their occupation. So I think I would like to end this entire presentation by saying that the design talked about an empathetic development for the occupation, its people and the heritage that it had. So it was not about, I took the risk of not defining my scope from the beginning. I took the risk of letting the research let me flow with it and then come down to a solution which was exactly what they needed. So the only decision that I made was some design related decisions, and second was to understand which precinct I would want to pick. Apart from that, I offered them exactly what they needed with an architectural perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kim. Started off with a bang. Shruti, can we have you next? Is it all set up? Okay.
Hello. So I'd like to start not with the title of my thesis, but what I had a thought in my mind with and I went along. So basically what I wanted to start with was, in fourth year, in second year I think we learned about Kevin Lynch, and then it carried forward in many assignments further, but that what was left behind was how do we analyze a neighborhood? How do we look at different places? As citizens and also as students of architecture, how do we look at spaces? So what further led me into my topic was understanding different place markers. So this term that I I think coined myself, I don't know, but was place markers. This term was a place that I wanted to look at and how it impacted a lot of people in their neighborhood. So there were these questions that I came with in my initial stage of research, which I have mentioned here. Firstly, how place markers indicate or distinguish a space, and how, like in a dozen of different spaces, you come to that one place and understand that this is something different. This is what recognizes and identifies the different communities around. Secondly, standing tall in a crowd. So there are different notions, different ideas of nostalgia, different ideas of bonding, community, livelihood are all mixed and matched in a story that is left behind and which is told over generations, and then we kind of sort of want to explore it more when we come to a space like that. And thirdly, when nostalgia here becomes a tool, when it becomes an identifier to that place itself, and these stories become a body, and then we want to explore it more. So these were kind of questions that I wanted to go forward with, and then I came to my topic with a process in mind that I would want to look at a space in this way. So placemaking as an urban process was introduced to us in 4th year, and then we as students were led to explore it on our own. So that topic in mind, I went ahead and this hypothesis came in mind, where this question and the statement stayed with me for my whole research. So where placemaking becomes a phenomenological concept, a concept which basically adheres to the experience of a person or a citizen, and then it takes you forward to look at it through that lens and identify an urban neighborhood and try to locate solutions, or firstly locate problems, then you'll have solutions, and then look at realms around and try to kind of come to a place where it needs the kind of attention which will lead to the hypothesis that I'm saying about. Placemaking as a phenomenological concept can create potential and effective urban solutions, which will then lead to disconnect which is formed over generations in public ends. So further when I go, understanding the whole process of placemaking, firstly we come to space and placemaking and we try to understand what is it. Then we go about identifying what sense of place is. So this whole research is backed by different papers that I read about, and I try to understand in a level where I'm not just a student of architecture but also a citizen who's experiencing a space. So this process of research meant reading various papers, meant experiencing, going to places and looking at places that could be potential sites later on, but firstly having research examples or site examples to mention in my book. So when I went along in my research, what I tried to mind map was how do place markers fit into this whole concept that I'm trying to create on my own. So here when I talk about space and human interaction, what other catalysts are affecting this? So there was gentrification, there was commercialization of a place, there was globalization, there was urbanization, and all these big huge words that affect a place are also some things that affect to all the smaller processes that are happening in our neighborhood. So when all of this combines to an environment, to all the trends that are happening to a place, what we realize is that there is something that is not changing, or there is something that we think should not change but is there in all of this mix. And then we go ahead and try to, I went ahead and I tried to mark where placemaking could come into the picture, and there I could relate to sense of place, or I could relate to phenomenology, or I could relate to the human entity in it. So this was the research of sense of place, but when I went ahead and tried to look at how do I find a site now. There are so many places where I could pinpoint, where we could talk about nostalgia, where we could talk about understanding a place, but how do I pick a site? So a cultural lens came into picture, where we look at how different places identify themselves, not because of culture is not religion here or faith here, it is just how organically a neighborhood has developed around something, or how organically a neighborhood has changed over time. And hence, when I'm looking at cultural place markers, the epicenter of a community usually starts with a place marker, and hence that I went ahead with this lens. And then I tried to visit different sites in my city, because that is where I've lived all my life. So I wanted to explore it more. And I looked at different places in Mumbai where place markers are there, but what is affecting them and how do they reside in all of this changing environment? And hence, sites like this one is the Golai Pagoda, the other is the yeah. So when I looked at all of these sites, what I wanted to decode was how does placemaking process revolve around all of this? How to analyze cultural links that were formed in all of these places, and how I could look at these places through a lens where I could look at problems and try to have solutions for them. So when I went ahead, there were three major sites that played a part in me trying to decide to come to my site. So basically, first one was Chembur. So I went to the site, I looked at the place firstly. The second time I went to the site, I looked at what problems I could see. The third time I went to the site, I tried to pinpoint problems. And then, firstly here, when I went to all of the three sites, then I came up with how I could distinguish them. So basically, how I tried to decode Chembur was it has its own heritage, it has its own problems, it has its own localities and communities which reside in their heritage homes. But then what I could see in this place was the cultural marker was still intact, but the precinct needed revitalization. Secondly, this one was Bhatti Kolivada, which is near Margay. So here, what I tried to look at was how the people here resided, how the occupation here worked in flow with how they lived, and how livelihood played a very important role in the cultural place markerness of the place. So here, what I could find out was the cultural marker is not a singular place, but a whole of the area, because here it needed revitalization in terms of many smaller interventions. And thirdly, what I could see was this is the Siddhivinayak precinct, and here when I came to the site, I could see that firstly I had been to Siddhivinayak, but I didn't remember it because I had been very young. And then when I went ahead and visited it many times again, I could see that what people told me was very different from what I could see. So what I could relate to was there was a loss of something that I didn't understand, but I needed to look into more. And hence the term, the statement that I coined with it was when the cultural marker is losing its original essence and identity, and hence I wanted to look ahead more into it. So finally, the site that I decided was the Siddhivinayak precinct and understanding the cultural marker. So when I looked into the research of understanding the place itself and mind map all the space, all the things that I could pinpoint, what I wanted to see was how organically Siddhivinayak fit into my points of identity, my points of memory, nostalgia, my points of culture. And hence I went ahead with it and tried to mark down its history, where understanding of the history of the place becomes very important to realize what problems it will face and what it is facing over a period of time. And hence when I looked at Siddhivinayak as a cultural marker, there was a consistent amount of change that had happened throughout the history of Siddhivinayak, where the place itself has changed over the years, that people don't relate to it anymore, where there is a visual barrier, there is a globalization trend that is happening, which is changing the face of the cultural marker itself. So identifying it through historic imagery, identifying it through different layers of research, and through different decoding the precinct itself. This is all mentioned in my panels outside. What I wanted to show you was how Siddhivinayak has changed over the years. So delayering the precinct using the original principles that I wanted to look at was how it forms extensions and how there are congregation spaces that are forming at different nodes, how market spaces are located, and how the shop lanes are there, how there is overcrowding when there is some festival that is happening, how the precinct is going to change, and if you know, there is a major catalyst that is going to come into picture when we talk about Siddhivinayak precinct, which is the underground metro station that is going to happen in the under the Nadula tank, and also the ground that is located there. So all these catalysts that are going to change the precinct and how it has changed already was my standoff point to go into my research, and then like understanding the context and how the urban fabric around it revolves around. So these three major catalysts was what I mentioned in my research mostly, were the rapid urbanization that is happening of the precinct, the increased security, and also the increased visual and barriers that are happening, and also the metro line that comes into picture. So mentioning all of this led me to understand how I could look at smaller interventions that could play a part in binding all of these spaces together and to creating an urban realm that will help the people that from now on come to the precinct could actually revive the journey, and hence I tried to map all of these problems and then to come up with solutions that could open up the precinct more. So firstly it was opening the temple visually as well as phenomenologically. Secondly it was the crowd control and chaos. Thirdly it was how to improve walkability around the precinct, because there were green spaces that were there located around it, and how I could look at them in a lens where it forms a big urban realm around it. Fourthly, it was to avoid encroachment over the garden that is already there. Because of the metro construction, it is going to change, but how to still retain the essence of the garden, of the ground around it, and how congregation and integration of the precinct can happen, of the neighborhoods, of the private neighborhoods, of the commercial neighborhoods, of the temple, religious precinct of it. And then further, there was these design decisions and interventions that I took ahead and went forward with. So there were these intervention nodes that I located. So firstly, it was the 2 entrance and exit points, and then it was the ground area and interventions of the and how I could extend the shop market lanes, and also how a big urban lane could be made, which would incorporate the different metro exits that are coming to picture when the metro construction is finished. So yeah, I think I'll go, you can go through the design. So basically what my design zones mentioned majorly was how different journeys happen. So the zone 1 with a journey where you could incorporate design ideas of incorporating booking earlier and creating crowd control barriers at different levels. Secondly, there was a design a journey where you go through the journey fully, but how do you enter, how do you come out, and how do you experience the journey? How is crowd control physically mentioned at different places? Then thirdly, this was majorly the walkability of the precinct, and how I looked at creating market spaces and congregation spaces. So when there is spillover from the temple, how can accommodate in a place where congregation of people can happen, and also how the already existing Nana Nani Park can be converted into something that could be inclusive to all the kinds of crowd that is coming in, the devotees, the annual visitors, the different festivals that are happening. And so yeah, the temple plaza, and lastly it was the market spaces. So what I would like to end with is how I looked at census space and how I looked at an urban identity and how I tried to use the history of it to create a design which reflected integration and like revitalization of it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shruti. We move on to Tanvi. Tanvi Salunke.
Hello all, a very good morning to one and all present here. Myself Tanvi Sarvage, presenting you all my final year thesis journey. So before moving ahead, I would like to thank the principal sir and my faculties for being considerate and giving us the opportunity to showcase our work to our juniors. So here to begin with, my thesis topic was the research was about recoding street markets and endeavor to revive urban street markets. So as we all know that in layman's language, market is all about the activity of buying and selling products. So here the reason behind selecting this topic was I wanted to research more about how marketplaces impact our lives on daily basis. All these years, this curriculum has taught me to be observant and look through different perspectives, and also consider certain things in a sensitive approach. So therefore, this was a time I decided to visit this marketplace and research them in depth, where the primary motive can be also looked upon as well as a secondary. So people interacting at a certain place tend to form a community. So therefore this interaction becomes a part of the routine, and at the end this whole thing can turn out to be a respective landmark of a region. So we all know the difference between the rural and urban context, but the only thing I would like to mention the similar ones between both of them were the communal spaces present around them. So whether it be a place under a tree or a lavish plaza in a city, these are the communal spaces where people love to interact. So hence while researching, I came across where the history of marketplaces were one of them, where the prominent ones were where people used to be a part of it beyond its original motive. Therefore, it can be said as it was a platform to engage, interact, and as well as to socialize with different people. So later on, I tried to analyze market spaces in a way where how they are in the current scenario and how they were in the past times. So later on, these I also considered what is changed now and what are the trends which are followed and many more. So I also tried to look upon different perspectives where these places turned into actual public realm because of the different type of occasions taking place. So this was the aim of my research. It was an attempt to understand marketplaces as an essential public space. So in an urban context. So basically, here was the basic flow of my research, where the need of the study was what is the major thing which I am gonna focusing on, and what are the things which I will be highlighting. And later on, this was followed by the objectives which were decided where in a pointer form, where what will be the things which I looked upon and what will be the things which I'll work upon, or else I'll keep it on hold and consider further. And next, also this was again followed with the process where the initial stage where we actually decode that what are the things we are going through, like how we achieve our objectives, like the processes of, like for example, doing case studies, and or also by writing a few, referring to few articles. And then further, this was again the limitations came into picture, where we realized that while researching we can come across many perspectives and many things where we have to go back and forth, and if we have decided our research in certain direction, it cannot work in that way. So we have to relook back and like also again change our objectives. And then in my case, it was when I started doing case studies, I observed lot of things where actually it all changed, and it was turned out to be different. Then the next one is conclusion. Like we derive onto conclusions after writing whole book or writing the chapters, and which further followed up to the intervention, like the architectural intervention. It was about what are the new trends and technologies coming into picture, and why is it not creating comfort for many of the people. So because there are few part of people where people do like to go for affordability and like actually visiting the place, whether it will be a kiosk or anything. So to support my research, I started off by decoding the character, which was actually the case studies part. So these were few of the parameters where I tried to decode by considering few of the places of different region, so that I can get different perspectives. So the case studies which I considered was the Crawford Market, being the oldest one in Mumbai. The next one was Vileparle East Market. The next two was one in Vashi and one was in CBD Belapur, because it being a Navi Mumbai region, the development has already taken place. So I wanted to analyze that what different does it offers. So these were few of the diagrams which I tried to do to support my analysis. So this was for the appearance. So I'll just go through all of like few of them. This was the retail and non-retail activities in 4 of these regions. The working patterns, movement patterns, and also there are many more. You can look onto the panels. So the next one was, while observing this and concluding at one point, the issues were also observed. So these were few of the issues, like the congestions, the cramped roads, then not proper sanitation facility or the cleanliness thing, and also lack of designated parking spaces. So the design intent was derived by thinking of how I can deal with these issues. So initially my title was decoding the street markets, but later on by analyzing, then planning everything and then implementing, I decided, and the topic title was changed onto recoding street markets. So later on the recoding process was considered, like these points were for the analysis as the basis of my program, and it was my attempt to change the negative ones into the positive ones. So this was my design intent, where I tried to consider new trends and also to look after the community or the places, not specifically any community, but all the users who will be around, to uplift them, and whether this both combination can act as a liable public space. Then these were few of the key pointers where which I tried to include in my design program, and this was the vision, where how I can create my my design program well for everyone. So these were the options for my site. So this one was in Lalbagh in Mumbai. The second one was in Matunga, again in Mumbai. The third one was in Kharkopar, the Ulve region of Mumbai, Navi Mumbai. So the site which I selected was Navi Mumbai. So the reason selecting this site was, so my whole topic was about decoding the street market. So why not to start with the place where where that place is not totally developed, so that I can when that is getting it planned, I can start off with actually attempting my ideas and make it in proper way where the tangible factors like the services, circulation, everything can be sorted properly, and the intangible ones where people actually try to just roam around can be looked after properly. So this was the major context of my site. The strong one was the Trans Harbour link, which is getting built right now, and also the Kharkopar station. So right now many public activities are observed around the station since the railway frequency is not that proper. So I tried to consider those activities also and tried to retain them in my design. So this was just the current site condition which I studied. You can also see this on my panel which are present. And after analyzing all of them and the activities, I tried to, these were the provisions of my proposed design. And these were actually attempted by considering the different type of user groups, which were ranging from the kids to the senior citizens. And this was the basic site zoning of my site. So since I said that I was considering certain intangible factors, so the public space came into picture. So my whole ground line structure was a marketplace, also with certain different activities. But the upper one was the public plaza, where the activities which I mentioned previously can actually be practiced over there. So this was just the part of my design where since it was a huge market, so I had to provide a development plan for at least 10 to 15 years in future. So I tried to provide it with a proper market as well as the commercial activities like the commercial offices and parking spaces because it was near the station precinct. So this was one of the the cluster, like how I planned, considering the normal non-veg markets and then other types of markets. And then these were the modules which you can see over there are actually analyzed and provided by considering and seeing that of both of the users, like the seller and the buyer. So this was the section which I would like to show you all. It was cut through the retail store and small stalls. So basically it was just to showcase that like the detailings about the roof system and how the space will be, and also the provisions like how the platform and everything will be, like for example the storages also it was made. And this was the section through the non-veg shops. So I have strategically placed these shops differently because there are few people who won't like to visit them like together. So that's why this was also one of the considering factor. And also waste management strategy was introduced where since it was a marketplace, so the services had to be proper and the cleanliness had to be taken care of at most. So organic waste composters were also provided so that the dry and wet waste can be bifurcated properly. So yeah, that's it with my design research process. So it was just a approach where I could try to give the justice to the tangible and as well as the intangible aspects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanvi. Can we have questions from the audience? We had 3 very interesting presentations. I'm sure there's a lot that I'm hoping at least that there's a lot that's going on in your heads right now. And it will be a good idea to ask the students who have already been through that process the doubts that you have.
So my question is for Kimaya. Hi. So it is more about documentation. So when you talk about Dhobi Garden, introducing an intervention, you probably also had to study a lot of soft networks except the requisites. So how did you go around studying that? Like, like networks like dispatch, how people are grouped together and all that?
So I think what my entire design dealt with was not to hamper the occupation, because the occupation was working fine. As I mentioned, the network was working intact. Because the site was never given to the dhobis. It started with 40 dhobis, and it was not given to the dhobis to be a living space. It was for them to practice their occupation. But due to land being an expensive affair in Mumbai as it increased, that was the space where they tried to accommodate, because there was no option left. So the occupation was something that I didn't touch in terms of the network. I made more space for them. I tried to declutter the entire space so that the occupation remains intact. So documenting the occupation, I would say, was more with interacting with the dhobis there. The families were not that open, because as I mentioned that there's a dispute going on where they are trying to prove that site to be a slum area, so that they can, with that FSI of 4, they can build a redevelopment project there, which will basically ship them into skyscrapers. So they were not open to talk about how they are doing it, but then somewhere multiple site visits, going on the site every day, letting them know that I'm a student, why am I doing, what am I doing, and somewhere trying to, as I mentioned, trying to gain their confidence. And then again through manual mapping, through manual data analysis and Excel sheets. Yeah.
Hi, Hima. Thank you for an amazing presentation. I have 2 questions. The first one, you mentioned that your scope was not certain, like for a longer period of time. So for people having certain topics where the scope changes, how would you like to, like, certain insight on it, of how to manage it and all the inhibitions which come through?
So when we started, my guide was Mridula ma'am, and I remember we thought, I mean, I know we didn't start with a preconceived notion, but somewhere we get an idea as to, we were trying to deal with details, if I have to mention. So we predicted that the design intervention, the design intent might lead to something which is very basic, like just designing a toilet, but through an empathetic approach. So we didn't, as I mentioned, I took the risk of not having an outcome mentioned. So in my initial research, every time that we had discussions with other faculties as well, I didn't mention my scope. I did let them know that it was intended to be unknown. It will take its time to develop. It will let me flow with that process. So I think it's all about you believing in that your research will lead you somewhere and taking that risk ahead. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Another one is, like, you in the presentation also you segregated your research like structure as well. So what was the timeline in flowing from one to another, and because we have limited scope, right? So how is that?
So I started with empathy, I will say, but I parallelly was analyzing Mumbai. So one thing that worked in my favor was that I live in the city, so I could travel every day. So instead of directly going home, I maybe traveled some other precincts. Also, I will give a little credit to my internship, because those 6 months was me walking around in Mumbai. So pausing at different points, trying to talk to people, because it's what my job demanded. And at the same time, that's something that I loved to do. So I feel like the timeline couldn't be defined. Your research, okay, you should always be reading something. I know I might sound like a kya, but honestly, it helps in the entire research process that you need to keep reading. That you can't start with something, then come on to something else. So I knew that I have empathy in picture. I knew that I had Mumbai as a precinct. So my research actually began reading about both of them, documenting both of these aspects parallelly, and then drawing observations. So which actually helped me to correlate them in a very organic manner. I didn't have to put an extra time, as you mentioned that we have limited time. So I didn't have, even though these 2 aspects demanded a massive research, I didn't have to sit differently and build connections. It was already building through the period.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would like to ask you a question of execution. As you mentioned, your execution stage of the intervention had phases. So I would like to ask you how you came up with those stages and how the process evolved around those stages.
So as I mentioned, my entire design largely had 3 aspects. One was the people, The first one was the occupation, second was people, and the third was the heritage. So when I had my site visits, what I noticed was that even though they don't use those 730 tanks, the tanks still have a lot of historical importance to even hierarchy of the generations have been valuing those tanks, and they have been retaining those tanks. I won't say maintaining or using. So it started with me trying to understand that how I won't scare them from the fact that I'm creating a new space for them altogether. So my first aspect was, as I mentioned in my presentation, that to gain confidence of these people. So how will I do that? Is when I first give them something before taking something away from them. So I first started with, as I mentioned, that I maintained more tanks than I demolished. So it was a very critical decision because the tanks came under Heritage 2A grade. So I had to be very, I guess, cautious and critical as to why am I breaking or demolishing certain tanks, and at the same time, what am I doing with that? So my phase-wise process was not displacing them to a location which is far away from their occupation because they'll have to travel and the occupation might get hampered. Second was to, at every stage, make them understand that if I am taking away something from you, I am offering you something more, which will help you live longer and better as terms of your living conditions as a community. And yeah, then the process became more of how there was an empathetic lens in every way. So it was a cautious way as to how I change, add or subtract.
So hi, my question is very basic to the when you're arriving at the scope of your. So you started with empathy as the only. So empathy will be related to many fields. Like so, can you elaborate on how do you narrow down to a certain?
So if you look at my initial observations, it dealt with different precincts, and I mentioned how it was different spaces, different people. So I understood that Mumbai as a city, even though it's functioning together, is made up of a lot of pockets of communities. So that's when, so my research then led me to understand these different communities and what made them a community. That's where the driving forces came into picture. So I tried to understand as to how they all as one city are trying to develop the city, but at the same time have their own sense of being, have their own way of living, and this compromised or is getting hampered by the development of the city today or the globalized standards of the city. So it started with me understanding empathy as a theory and developing it as a practice for my design. So scoping down would be when it majorly happened when I narrowed down my scope to Mumbai, because then I started looking at its communities, and that's when actually my scope enlarged. My scope went from just a small detail to proper planning of 632 families within the site. So yeah, I think you will, when you start answering your questions through your processes, when you will get your scope. It's not that difficult.
Questions for Shruti, Tanvi?
So I have a question for Tanvi. So I wanted to ask, like, when you were studying street markets, so markets, like what we observe is different, and there are a lot of processes that go behind, that are not seen by normal people or when we observe. So how did you go about studying those processes that happen when users are not using the space, when the shopkeepers, how the, like especially in street markets, there are a lot of processes going behind also. So how did you study those processes that, they won't let the general users see?
So starting off, like when I started decoding the character, like for example the case studies, so the major process was loading and unloading of the goods and services for everything, like starting from the normal vegetable market to the normal retail store. So it was happened where I visited the market many a times on different period of time, where I also remember at one point of time I actually visited a market from morning when the loading and unloading they used to come, and till the evening part where everything when the market was actually getting set up for the users. So if your topic is aligned in such a way where you have to decode certain parameters where which cannot be seen by any normal people. So you have to visit that place in different period of time, and so that you can actually decide what are the problems and what are the things where you can tackle it architecturally.
Hi Tanvi. So one of my, like you mentioned in your presentation that one of your limitations was to relook at the objectives. If I'm not wrong, can you elaborate more on it, on how you went about to and fro about relooking at the objectives as your limitations?
So, firstly, when I started getting crits on my research, in the process, so it was about like, why are you not trying to adapt the technologies which are taking place? Because after a certain period of time, everything will be vanished. But I tried to maintain. So at that point, I tried to rechange my objectives into, okay, I'll look up to like how I can actually create a normal hawking zone into a digitally processed market. But then later on, my whole topic and whole idea was about reviving the older times, or reviving that old touch of the street markets, like how authentic it was. So I again reanalyzed also my objectives in a way where everything could lead on into that direction. And again, I had started preparing my statements in such a way where this can be supported easily, so that I cannot get any different grade. Because once you decide that if your direction is in proper way, then I guess it goes well, because then you can actually don't have to prepare anything if it is logical enough.
Thank you.
Questions? Any more questions from the audience?
I have a question for Shruti. So, hi Shruti. I wanted to ask, like your first part of your research was very theoretical and phenomenological, but then how did you shift, or the transition was to your site selection, where you were particularly looking at a cultural marker rather than all the other aspects of a place marker?
Hello. Hi. So basically, when I was earlier looking at sites, I had many sites in picture where the scope was so large that any site I could take would fit in well into as a place marker, and it would have its own problems and would require its own solutions. But then what we tried to look at was how a site authentically fell into the term that I coined as a place marker. So when the lens of culture came into picture, culture was not related only to religion or only to faith, or it was how organically something came up and how organically people accepted it. So when we talk about Siddhivinayak, if we say Siddhivinayak, people will not say it's not a place marker. It is undeniable like that. So that the site selection like that was easier in a way when that site came into picture. But earlier it was so large that I had to look at so many places at a time where their own set of problems. But then Nidra ma'am were like, "ये भी हो सकता है, ये भी हो सकता है." So yeah.
Any more questions? Okay. We take a 2-minute break and we get back for the next session. Yeah? Literally 2 minutes, please. No questions, right, Ramesh? No questions. You know everything. Doesn't matter. But it's not.
Can I have your texture classes, please, and get everybody back? Thank you.
The exhibition is up for 2 days. You can take your time and go through the panels in the auditorium, in the ground floor lobby, and in the art court on the first floor. So we begin with the second session today. First presenter in the second session we have Harsh Salvi. You can begin, Harsh. Thank you.
Good morning everyone. I am architect Harsh Salvi and I would like to take this opportunity to present my architectural thesis that delves into the significance of station premises and the impact on the user existence. So my topic name is remodeling the station precinct in public realm. So this study basically focuses on understanding the precinct as an integral part of the city as well as the user. So moving ahead. So I would like to begin with 3 basic questions before the research. What is the station precinct? So station precinct is something which is an area surrounding the transportation hub that might consist of buses, public transport, amenities, infrastructure, streets and everything. But that is the thing that connects the transportation hub to a neighborhood. So the second question arises is what is the importance of station precinct? So the importance of station precinct is that it helps in, it plays a major role in urban connectivity as well as a major factor in social interaction. And it plays a place for resources for the residents. Like for example, if someone wants to buy anything, majorly the markets are placed in the station precinct. So that acts as a resources for the residents living there, also the commuters there. So the third question is, what are the impacts? The station precincts are the major impactful pointer for the city. So it is the factor that leads to the overall growth and development of the city. As soon as the station gets built over a place, the overall development of a city starts from that point. So this plays a major impactful role. Also, before going into the research part of it, I thought I should see the research not as an infrastructure project, but also as a philosophical project, wherein station precincts, what does they play a role in a human life and how user perceives that. So there are major factors about it to study it: the user group, the amount of footfall, the user experience, built environment, urban development, the identity of the city, and the user convenience. So this brings me the aim of the research. The aim of the research is to study the station precincts and understanding the significance in the user existence. So starting with the research part. So what I thought was I should start with the history of all the stations in Mumbai. So I started researching about the history of the stations, and this led me to a conclusion that these stations have been evolving from a lot of years, but the stations were designed at an era where the population was so much less, and these stations were meant to be catering the population which was at that time period. So in the current scenario, these station doesn't help or doesn't stand in the population which is right now. So I thought I should study the current scenario also. So starting with the current scenario, I started listing down the issues which are there in the nowadays scenario. So the major issues were overcrowding in the precinct, unplanned spaces, mismanagement of traffic flows, high density parking requirements, unplanned utility spaces, poor facilities, and many more, such as unorganized entry-exit points. So this led me to the case study of my thing. So I have been a daily commuter since years, and for this journey of my architecture through 5 years, I have been traveling from Nerul to Bandra, and I have been experiencing the 3 major stations: Nerul, Kurla, and Bandra. So what I thought was to understand and do a case study for the research part. I should take 3 stations that I have been experiencing personally and see it as a user and not an architect. So I selected these 3 stations, Bandra, Kurla and Nerul. All the 3 stations have a wide spectrum of footfall in terms of activities and everything. So I did a deciphering of this station by delayering of the mapping. So for example, in the aspects of precinct, I studied the locality, the landmarks, what are the context of it, and then understand the complexity around the station. So complexity means the activity mapping of the area, what all activities happen, what activity leads to the traffic congestion over there, what is the major restriction of the station there. So I use sketching as a medium to sketch out the activity mappings. So I studied the pros and cons finally, and that helped me to basically finalize on the one side. But before going into the final side, what I thought was I should also study the positive factors about the station which are getting designed right now. So I studied 3 ideal precincts that have been designed right now. So first one was Thane Station. Thane Station is known for the Satis project, wherein they have segregated the vehicular movement such as public, like buses have they have segregated the bus movement at the upper deck and they have segregated rickshaws at the lower deck. So second one is the Seawood Railway Station, where the station is basically a newly made station that caters to the commercial aspect of the station. Like they have incorporated malls and commercial offices and everything. The third one is a Karkudama station precinct, which is basically a larger project that deals with the urban planning of the whole city. So yeah. So after studying that, finally I narrowed down to one side. So from all the side, I selected Bandra station as my site for development because that is what the station that needs an urgent architectural intervention. So yeah. Selecting Bandra East station was a major risk because everyone warned me about the station because it has an immense complexity over the precinct, and why Bandra East, why not Bandra West? That is a basic question which everyone will get. So Bandra West and Bandra East, both of the station is pretty old. It is one of the oldest station of Mumbai. But Bandra West has a already established identity, and it has basically a lot of interventions happening throughout for the enhancement of user experience. But looking at Bandra East, it is a prime location for the users because of the presence of BKC, Bandra Terminus and everything. But no one is thinking about the intervention about Bandra East. The places are still like covered with the slums and the poor facilities are happening over there. So I thought, why not someone someday have to take the responsibility to design the station, and so why not I thought like I should do the thing. So yeah, so I started mapping out the station because in the infrastructure projects you have to start doing mapping every time. So I started by mapping the vehicular movement map, the pedestrian movement maps which shows the entry exit to the station and everything. This helped me to understand what all the negative points of the station are there. So in terms of vehicular, there are a lot of bottlenecks happens on the road. In terms of pedestrian, there are no space for pedestrians, which I will explain further. So I studied the site strengths and opportunity. And then the major thing comes with a temporal analysis, where we have to visit the site for a day or 2 days and do a temporal analysis of traffic, because in my site, the traffic was a major issue. So I started analyzing that, and yeah, so further I went to MMRD office and studied about the government proposals, studied about the land use. So they told me a lot of information. So there are a lot of government proposals over the site, but no one has done the intervention yet. So there are proposals like road widening, commercial building, and Nara widening and everything. So why not considering that, but also giving something which I wanted to give as an architect. So yeah, so I did a photo documentation of the site and highlighted some of the issues which I felt as an architect should be dealt to create an ideal station precinct. There were issues like slums, There are immediate slumps after exiting the station. There are the narrower road widths, and there are abrupt rickshaw parkings and everything. So moving ahead, this is the illustration that shows overall Banda station, East Station complex, which has a Banda station on the left side and the Anand Karekar mark at the right side, which you can see. And there is a Nala that runs toward the road and that connects to the Viti river. And there is a Bairampada, huge chunk of land covered with the Bairampada slums. So yeah. So before designing actually, what I thought was I should compare the current scenario and then do some interventions about how the current scenario can be tackled. So this first aspect is you can see the built mass. So the site is currently covered with a lot of built mass of slums and the footbridges are like they cross the slums and land onto the road. So what I thought was to reduce the built mass and then create open spaces for the public to move out freely. The second aspect is the footbridges. The footbridges just crosses the slums and lands over the edge of the road. And this is why the people moving out at the peak hours make the road congested. Like a lot of congestion happens there. So that's why what I thought was the major factor was to take the landings of the footbridges at the edge of the site so that people can exit the station at the very edge and they can move out freely. The third one is the vehicular complexity. So there is no space for vehicles to stop at the road. So there are no drop-off spaces, no entry-exit points for the vehicles to move in freely. The rickshaws are so much there that they create a lot of havoc there. So creating a space for them is like I thought like for the public transport I should take the movement at the site and not on the road. So I took all the public transport on the site itself. And the fourth one is the pedestrian movement, which is the most important factor when you design a public, like an infrastructure project or a government project. So there should be enough space for public to move in, move out. So currently there is no space for public. There is like the public enters onto the road directly and they just disperse out. And so what I thought was I should create a public plaza space for them to freely move out and move in, and them to decide wherever they want to go. Whether they want to go to BKC, whether they want to go to Bandra Terminus, they can easily decide, wait and then go. So yeah, so that is my strength where I express this, whatever my feelings in the sketches. So I sketched out a precinct in my whatever as a user, like what are the memories when I exit the station, enter the station, what are the activities happening over there, and I did some of the things. So yeah. So going on to the design intent, I felt that there are major aspects that should be incorporated in design, such as context response. Legibility is the thing where the Bandra station doesn't have any identity right now. So wayfinding, mixed land use, public spaces and pedestrianization. So my design intent was pretty simple that I will create a public utility space, and then a lot of amenities within that a user can have, and it was basically for the user enhancement of a user convenience. Precincts still works at the current scenario, but what I wanted to do is to enhance the user experience and give them basically resources. So this is the overall scenario, overall view of the design which I prepared. So as you can see, I divided the zones in the levels. So below 2 floors I gave it for the railway purposes, and the above 2 floors I gave it for the commercial purposes. So commercial, I proposed commercial because of the revenue generation factor, because a project like station, it should be self-sustainable, and for the maintenance purpose, the revenue generation is the most thing. So I proposed affordable kind of commercial. So yeah. Was studying, so I will give the glimpse of my design. You can see the panels there. So talking about the built mass of the design. So what I did was to incorporate the maximum footfall of the station. I proposed a lot, much more open spaces in the build itself. The ground floor is pretty open for the constant movement of the users, and I placed the stagnant spaces on the upper floor so that the people standing there won't hinder the movement of the pedestrians. So this is the section you can see, longer section cutting through the both entry blocks. Yeah. So railway station is a project like it should be robust as well as sustainable. So and it should also have a low maintenance cost. So I selected steel as a construction member. So in the overall process of designing, it was a great thing to explore all the joineries and all the details about the steel construction. So this was one of the section detail of about the facade which I designed for the commercial offices. Yeah. So this is a section cutting through the overall road and the station. So another major factor for me for designing is the nala. So the nala is something which which creates a boundary for the slum dwellers, also for the station users. So what I thought was I should design the nala edge also for the slum dwellers as well as the users. So these are some interventions which I did. So I created a public space for the slum dwellers also to try to interact with the users along and them not to be secluded somewhere else. So yeah. So this was my overall design. You can see the panels for the detailed design and thank you.
Thank you, Harsh. There's something about the graphics that you use every time that never fails to mesmerize an audience. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next we have Manasvi. There should not be a line.
Good afternoon everyone, my name is Manasvi and I would like to discuss my thesis, that is co-living in an urban setup and under the guidance of architect Anmol Wari sir. So before I delve into the details, I want to mention that this topic emerged organically through my daily observations or perhaps influenced by few experiences during trips with my friends which we opted where we opted for a co-living hostel and for the 5 years that I spent in a city away from home. So this topic basically arrived through all of these experiences. Yeah. So I began my thesis by first gaining an understanding that what co-living is and its fundamental meaning. So co-living is a housing concept where individuals share a living space. So it basically provides for opportunities to residents to interact, communicate, and build a space and build connections with each other. A location where people can socialize and choose to maintain the privacy whenever necessary. It is based on a notion that different people use space in different ways on a regular setting. Each individual can find their own private, public and semi-public space within a single complex. So this is the basic idea of how I understand co-living as it is. So why there is a need for this study is that a recent study has found that a significant percentage of Indian population lacks several essential elements of a decent standard of living. So these elements known as decent standard of living include material resources necessary for well-being. As a result of increasing in demand, the rental market witnessed a surge in rental prices and therefore rendering it unaffordable for general public. In response to this demand, alternative solutions such as co-living, where your expenses get shared and you get the opportunity to stay with people, connect with people, and what better opportunity than this, where you get to say connect people and make more contacts to our world. It has existed since the earliest of the civilizations. So in the past, humans lived as hunters, residing in expansive nomadic camps. So even today, whenever we go to a new city, maybe finding for a job or as a student, we always opt for a space where we have company or people living together with us, and we don't go completely like अकेले रहना है ऐसा कुछ. We always look forward for people to share a space with in a new complete setup. So I just went through this whole history of co-living, and then arrived at a point that even from the early 2000 years to right now, co-living is the solution to this lack of space in an urban context. So yeah. So further, there was a ranking. So further, what I went on to say research in my thesis is what are the benefits of co-living. So basic pointers that I found were ease of living, affordability, sense of community, and exposure and leniency to move around the city itself. And it also sort of in the start of my thesis, I was completely directionless, and this is how I sort of started to build my pointers one after other. That what is co-living? Why do we need to study it? And then what are the benefits of it? So further, honestly, during the initial phase of my thesis, I had this preconceived notion that co-living simply meant that friends living together in affordable hostel options or so on. However, I have come to realize that it encompasses more than that. And thanks to discussion with my guides and my further research, I came up with these different sort of user groups which actually co-live. So if you say, take a daily example, working women, there are hostels present where working women co-live. The students which opt for hostels. There are people who are traveling to a new city or a new, say even a hill station. They opt for a hostel or a dorm sort of setup. So or even healthcare and industrial workers. So people coming from the north in Mumbai. So they have this setup in the MIDC area or somewhere that they have their own buildings where the company makes a solution for them to reside. Co-living for elderly, so all the old age homes where even the elderly people co-live together. The construction workers, for a site that is running, all these construction workers stay together on a site. And then a slum rehabilitation. So whenever a slum gets rehabilitated, they get into a setup where they have to live together and have to co-live with each other. So my biggest challenge was to boil down from all of these to one single user group, and which I further did was co-living for working women. So after doing a lot of research, going through different research books, research papers, going through a lot of graphs and everything, I further went down to this one user group that was working women. And as you can see in these few articles from the past, that there has been a lot of decrease of working women in an urban setup in India. So what could we do as architects to sort of bring the women to the workforce back again. So the need of R in this context is, as you can see, these were the few graphs that I made through my research, and which I found that even though the female literacy rate has gone up, but right now the female workforce population as per the census is going down, and one of the major reasons could be lack of living options in an urban context. Yeah. So what I further wanted to understand that what change can it bring to society. So what potential that this thesis holds. So there could be a social potential, an economic potential, and a cultural potential. Social potential is that it could bring women back. Into the workforce, and it would maybe reduce the pay gap that women actually face these days. And next is economic potential, where I studied these different stakeholders which could benefit by such a co-living setup that I am trying to build over. So which is working women, of course, they are the major stakeholders over here. The government, hostel trusts, commercial offices, where they could actually get these talented women working for them. And then there is maintenance staff and management staff who would work for these hostels or these co-living setups and earn a living for themselves. Next was cultural potential, how women in this city living alone could maybe grow together culturally or say emotionally, living in a setup where they are away from their family. So these were the few potentials that I wanted to see. Yeah. So further, as I started as I fixed my one user group, I then went on to do my case studies on what are the different options that are available these days for working women in I selected a city, Mumbai, as I am very I'm introduced to it recently and I wanted to explore it more. So therefore, my case study begins with Amrapali Working Women's Hostel, then to Birla Working Women's Hostel, and then Umanchal Working Women's Hostel, and I also did the Shram Sadhana Working Women's Hostel. Further, so what my basic process was through this, that and what my guide suggested, that see what more could you do to these working women's hostel. Either you redevelop these hostels or maybe build a new one for yourself. So I tried to see what are the pros and cons. So cons would be cons in these hostels would be lack of space, lack of say a communal space for these women to move around the hostel or something like that. But one thing that I saw, that one pro or maybe one thing that I could implement further was these hostels were trying to be self-sufficient by financially self-sufficient. Yeah. So these hostels were trying to be financially self-sufficient by renting a space out of it and giving it to different consumers and customers, and then gaining through that and reducing the the load from the working women's hostel, which the working women might have to pay. So the rent from there could be reduced and it could be increased by actually renting a space, giving a space to rent for the commercial setups. So these, yeah. Yeah, sorry for that. There were these few observations that what could be done better in these hostels, or maybe a hostel which maybe I can build altogether a new one. What better could be done here?
The internet is a little slow. Slow. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to draft. So through my observations and I tried to draft these spaces that I saw and draft these plans that I saw, that how is it feasible for a working woman, and I tried to draw a space by myself and tried to think that how are these women living in this space and how can they maybe get a better space and a better arrangement of these space in the interior and the exterior as well. So yeah. So further, this was Aditya Birla Working Women's Hostel in Chembur. Even here, this was a decent case study that I did, where I could actually see a lot of outdoor space, which is one thing that I could maybe take it further to my design. Yeah. So further, yeah. So I tried to make a plan of these buildings and try to see that how in a normal room how can a person say reside, and how is this place either sufficient or how is the experience that they get through these spaces. So I also lived at that time I also lived in a rented apartment with two of my friends. So it was a correlating experience for me as well. So further, after all these case studies, one thing I tried to understand by asking these women, that what are the challenges that you face in a new city, and what is it that you find missing in the city. So there are various tangible and intangible aspects of it. There is stress, social isolation, homesickness, workload, etc. And then there is also a lack of safety and security when they move around the neighborhood or even inside the building hostel space, and also a substandard living condition within the hostel building itself. How a space can be enhanced, and a person when a person say walks through a passage, how that experience could be positive rather than rather than negative. So further, I went on by writing down the design intent by looking at these problems that I want these few things in my in my whatever setup that I am going to design, that it needs to respond to the lack of spatial quality. It needs to respond to the interactive communal spaces, or it has to have a balance between private and public spaces. So this is how I first wrote down all the design intents that I want to have in my design, and how it could be a need-based approach. So a private space could be then changed into a public space, and could be then changed into a shared space. So further for site selection, I had the set parameters that would say align with my project. So there is first is obviously when you are living in Mumbai, you have to have a good connectivity to local transit system, and then proximity to maximum working women's area. You don't want a hostel to be 10 kilometers away or 20 kilometers away from a working women's or from a commercial setup, or say a IT setup, working setup. Next would be a public amenity and leisure public space around the site. So even if you yourself give a space within your site to move around, you also need to have a neighborhood which also provides something like that. Market and general store availability around the site. You have to have something like that when you are living in a new city all by yourself. Next is a residential or a safe surrounding around the site, and a walkable and well lit surrounding for the safety of these women. So then I further went on with the 3 sites, and tried to see that which of these sites has the maximum points covered within which I wanted, which I desired. So further, this site, my site is located in Mulund West, Mumbai. So those were the criteria, that proximity to transit system, etc. So this site was also near to all the local transit systems and the IT parks. So further, I went on to calculate the basic FSI and all the norms, saw all the norms, and how can a hostel building, or say a co-living building, can be set up over here. Further I did the site analysis, and as you can see, by choosing this site, I chose this particular site, and also it came under the DP norms. The site has these two big parks on behind and in front, that a construction building would never come over there. So behind it is a proposed ecological park, and in front there's a garden. So whenever I construct a high-rise building over there, the air quality would never be compromised over there. Further, I went so as you can further see my design on the panels on the first floor. So one basic thing I learned from the case studies I did was for your building to be financially viable, or for the rents to go a little down, you have to like I had this area which was partially given to a commercial setup, say a women based commercial setup, where which was say partially in the zoning itself, it was accessed by everyone, and then when it came to the working women's hostel, the hostel was completely accessible only to the working women and the staff over there, and no one could enter in that area. So hence the safety should not be compromised over here. So this was my further idea, that the area which you could see over here is the commercial area, and then further after here, the entire co-living setup and everything starts coming. So, with the mess situation and the canteen situation that I saw in my case study, you need to have a space which could actually give you a good air quality while you have a conversation with your friends, or say sit for a little chat and eat your food. And so therefore I wanted this space to be to act something like something like which could sorry, which could act like a leisure space, but still within the say rule book that whatever I have wanted to achieve within the specified area. So this is how I wanted the mesh to be. So in this section, as you could see, and further these are the rooms, and within these rooms, yeah. So over here, this is first wing and this is second wing, and this is the passage, or say the balcony that connects these two wings. So this particular wing has this particular balcony has to have a communal design where people where these women could actually sit and say whenever you see a gully where you see these women talking to each other, saying that what you did today in your entire day. So something like that, which would completely form an informal space, and it would also serve the purpose of say of circulation within the building itself. So these were my few. These were the few modules that I wanted to that I created, and which would say which would give these women to a space to sit within the building itself, and say and interact with each other. Say a co-working space within the rooms itself, a balcony space where you could maybe interact with different people from different floors. So something like that. So these are my further plans which you could see in my design. So my intention of doing this design, that everyone deserves a space that could make them feel better, and not take them to a negative space, and therefore this was my attempt to say create a comfortable space for these women, and also where they would try to say interact with each other within the communal passage that I try to be. So there are these balconies where on the alternate floors where you could see that a person from here could interact with a person from here, and balconies like these are created around the entire this communal passage. So further, yeah, this is my model, which I sadly couldn't bring today, but see. And my panels you could see on the first floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Manasvi. Coming up, we have Gautam.
Hello. Hello everyone. So my topic name is temporary housing for construction workers. So my guide was architect Meghna Patil. So I always wanted to study about the unorganized sector in India. So I started with like studying how the unorganized sector in India works, and also in 7th, 8th during the internship, I got to know about the construction workers, how they live and how various conditions they live in. So basically, I narrowed down to a main user group being the construction workers, and then also how the construction industry in India has a major like it's the third informal sector in India. So looking at that, and also we like we being an architect, the closest profession to our So the closest profession to our industry is the construction industry. So looking at the construction workers. So if you look at the construction industry in India, the five major aspects are one of the fastest growing industry and also third in the informal sector. So if you look at the labor functioning and the pattern of worker hiring, so there are various workers. There are various worker groups in India, but the basic principles for the hiring and the working of the workers is the same. Like there is a network of workers which are hired by a contractor and then deployed on the sites. But the site conditions or the living conditions of the workers are not that great because of the infrastructure provided on the site. So, like I also thought of researching more about the worker conditions and also how an architectural solution can be provided to the same. So, further I also studied about the communities which work on the sites. Like for example, major of the sites are from UP or Bihar. So the construction workers migrate because of the conditions which are the push and pull factors, which consist of poor living conditions, poor amenities, and also major factor is the major factor is a political dimension. So further I studied about how different sites hire the workers depending on the scale. Like large scale sites hire workers depending on a package base or a phase of development base, and also the journeys of the construction workers depend on the cities. For example, in Mumbai, major of the cities have workers from UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and all this. So further, the major part of my study was the on-site study of construction workers and their living conditions, and these are the demographics of India, how like what struggle the construction workers are facing. So the whole research was divided into 4 parts: the living conditions, the rules and regulations for the workers which are put forth by the government, and also the women and children living on sites and also working on sites. But the major part, like the whole research, almost 1 month of my research was for the on-site study, and so these are the parameters I looked upon while studying the site. So first were the site scenarios, like how various scales of sites are there on and how the construction workers are placed. Also the living conditions, like the amenities provided, the like how the houses are built using tar-patri or basic padarth. And also the typologies, like how many workers are living in a unit or how many workers are there for cleanliness or maintaining the amenities. So these are the first sites I visited in Bandra. Actually there were 6 to 7 sites, but because of the builders restrictions and all the legal laws, I only mentioned only 3 sites here. So first site was in Bandra. It was a very small site. So I studied how the flow works, also how the placement of the accommodation was there, the placement of the construction material which is used for the construction, and also how in phases the construction workers are shifted to inside the building after a certain point. So these are the observations I did, like how the amenities are placed, also the flow of the workers during the daytime and also after the work is done. So this is the second site in Thane. So this site was a larger site. It housed 800 workers, and also one of the different thing was the site had a proper housing provided for the workers because it was a L&T project. So basically they have a various standards for providing houses for the workers. But even though the planning of the site was not good because they never thought of the communities in the the third site was look at the planning and the build form, there was no natural light and ventilation for the workers. So this was the plan and how the workers were placed. So after doing the on-site study, I thought that majority of the structures are temporary structures, and for designing a housing or a basic model, I need to study how the temporary architecture works. So I did various study about the temporary facility model construction and disassembly to design. So basically, these were very large. Every part individually is a very large concept, but I studied a bit of it how it can be used for designing a housing for the construction workers. So the conclusion from the research was to have a context-specific architectural solution, and also to have a temporary resident housing. And another part was the financial part of the design and how it can be useful for the developers and contractors. So the project aim was to have an affordable architectural solution for the construction workers and also for the builders. So like my design was the main part which had a back and forth, but the research was a bit direct and linear. So this was my design intent, like how these are main parts which I looked upon while designing or having a basic idea of what I am going to do in the future. So these were the design parameters for making the models or having a basic idea how the material will be used, how the models will be placed, removed, and also moved from one place to another. So first in the materiality, the cost of the material, the durability, the life cycles, and also the climate responsive material, because once the climate changes, the life of the material changes. Yeah, this. Secondly, the flexibility, because how models are placed on the site and it can be added or removed. So I divided the whole four components into ground, wall, and roof and joints. So basically, ground was the like the foundation or the placement for the models. The wall was the infill panels or how temporary walls can be created. And roofing was depending on the site, like it can be roofing for a sloping roof or it can be flat roof. And joints for the addition of modules when necessary. So the second use was the use of materials once the life cycle is so replication was that every site has a fixed number of modules or a modular the workers in a modular. So basically the replication shows the volume required for the construction workers to live in. So portability was the transportation of the modules and also how it can be transported at a low cost and having less manpower. So like when starting the design, majority of us start with construction sites or having a site or a case study in mind, but I started with material study and also having design ideations for building the models and having a proper journal. So, like for the structural system, I use MS steel, and for the infill panels, I use PUF panels. But basically, to arrive at that, I researched various vendors and how the material can be used in an efficient way. So these are the joineries I thought of, like having a steel section and using bolts for the joinery. So it allows me to have a cost-effective design and also ease of transportation. So these are various modules are designed depending on the case study I did in the SAM 9. And these models were based on the number of workers, like 4 workers, 8 workers, and 6 workers. After 8 workers, the models become congested because they have to cook their own food, they have to live there also. The maintenance part of the models become a big problem. So before starting the design or having a complete survey, I need a side-by-side understanding how the workers on the site have to live and also the scale of the site besides the number of models used for it. So another part was the costing of the models. So the models available in market are more expensive and also they are not made in India. But these models, the costing was approximately 15 to 20% cheaper than the models are in the market. So this was the clustering of the models, like how the models are placed on site, and the view you can see how the models are joined to each other. So this is site 1, the same site which I did in the case study, which was placed in warehouse. So like basically planning the site in a way and also placing the model such that it creates a unity space and also has enough space for light and ventilation. This was the second site, which was in Thane, which housed 800 workers, and the major point was to have a community space and also having the services well aligned. So this is the view. So yeah, this was for the services and the project block, and how temporarily it can be based and good. Because once the construction workers are gone from the site, the remain should not be there on the site, because it creates a nuisance for the new residents of the building. And these are the other details I thought of while planning. So like basically my research was very direct or a linear way, but the design was back and forth of ideas.
Thank you, Gautam. Before we proceed to the questions, I hope by now you realize that the choice of the projects was also based on the scale of the architectural intervention, right? So it has varied from master planning and designing at master plan level to what Gautam has done, which is essentially a product, right? Which is why it had to be tested at so many sites to ensure that it is a viable product. Okay, so all of this as a range is possible in design definition. So don't limit yourself in terms of a thought process. Okay, moving on to questions for Gautam, for Harsh, and for Manasvi. Yeah, Jaya.
So my question is for Harsh. So during your presentation, you talked about the unauthorized settlement that exists. So how does the design tackles the problem of people that are currently living in those unauthorized settlements?
This was the question which everybody asked me. So for the slums, there are already government proposals for them to relocate to the location of Trombay. So already government is doing a lot for them, by supplying electricity, water supply and everything. But a space like railway line, it is used for public utility space, and then they have to relocate there somewhere else. So the slums which are occupied on the land of railway, I thought like I should go with the government proposal by relocating them in Trombay, and the slums which are present at the Berampara, the another larger chunk, I can provide some communal spaces or spaces for interaction for them to come and enter the station like that.
Okay, thank you.
My question to you is that when you talk about commercial spaces, since it's a area which is near to the railway, so what kind of commercial fields are you looking at, and have you given any provisions for noise cancellation or something, and have you designed space according to those specific commercial activities?
So the commercials were totally for the revenue generation purpose. So on the site, there were the slums. In that slums, they used to practice smaller trades like tailoring and the smaller businesses. So what I thought was there is existing highly commercial, like high front to commercial space in BKC. So for the area like Bandra station, I wanted to provide an affordable kind of commercial space where one small business or smaller shops can be rented there, if you have a meeting or something, you can just rent a smaller office and then you can have them. So that was my take for the commercial offices.
And did you consider parking as a part of your intervention? And when you travel through that station in the last bridge case entrance, where there's a bridge that is coming down, and there is always a clash of getting autos and something. So have you considered that in your design?
Yeah. So for the parking, so projects like transit-oriented development, the major aim for them is to promote public transport and not private transport, because there is a lot of increment in private transport and that results in pollution and everything. So what I thought was, if I am designing a transit-oriented development, I provided a parking at a basement level, where I am not promoting the private transport, but I am letting them come by their private vehicles and then they can park at the basement and then they can access the station.
My question to the second girl.
Manasvi. So good idea to know your seniors being the basketball camera.
Hi.
So apart from the advantages of the site that you said, what the context was like, there is no structure that is going to come. What led to the choosing of the site? Was there any did you research about women actually working in that particular area?
So what I did was I spotted these IT parks, or maybe Mulund is a location that connects Thane, that connects the central line, and that also connects Airoli, Ghansoli, and that IT sector over there. So having a space having a site that has local transit connected to it, and then therefore if people want to travel through the local transit, then that was the major point of selecting that particular site, so that people, even if their offices are located within the radius, they can still travel over there through public transit and still have that that land which is say given by the government itself for that particular building itself.
My question to Gautam. So when there's a site में area का constraint, is there a stack system that you designed, and to what level can it go?
So actually the models are designed such that it can be so the models were designed such that it can stack up to G+4, because after that like on site there are various hazards, like for example the machinery used on the site can cause a hazard to the journalists, and also it can be a problem while having a staircase on the site. So the number of staircases and also the number of modules stacked upon one another is increase the cost of the construction. So maximum G+1 is preferable.
And since it's a construction site and the workers that are migrating also migrate with their families sometimes.
Yeah.
So is there any child safety measures that you looked at while designing the modules?
So like actually by law, no children and women are allowed on site. They can work on site, but like after 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. they have to leave the site. So I thought of having a crash and a area, but for that the site should be about, like the workers should be about 200 workers. So like in my scope of design, the maximum workers were 800 workers. So
and what's the life cycle of the modules that you?
So the modules can be recycled 16 times. So basically a module can be placed on the site one time, removed. So basically it can be done the same thing 16 times.
Does it depend on the number of users?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nice questions there.
My question is for Manasvi. So since you're topic was about co-living Manasvi. So, unlike the PGs and the hostels today, co-living is also about gender-neutral places.
Yes.
So, did you look into that, and how did you decide on doing something for the working women? Also, did you look into the hostel chains like the Stanza Living, Zolo, and things like that?
Yeah, I definitely looked into. So the first question about the gender neutral spaces, I wanted to say cater to this particular gender because what the statistics say that male population are more in the offices rather than the female population, and there is much need for that population in a city like Mumbai or say in an urban context. So that was the main motive behind that even though we look at gender neutral spaces, but there is still a little bit need for women and there is still scope for these women to grow in a city like Mumbai. And the second question was,
Did you look for the hostel chains like Stanza Living for your case studies, or was it just related to the hostel?
no, I also went to these chains, but the entire thing was that these come into a setup that they are privately owned setup, and what I have that this entire setup is either partially hosted by a government or a commercial setup, or say a company like Tata, which is sort of say giving it to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my question is to Harsh. So you mentioned that there are certain proposals in Bandra East about the Nala widening, the road widening. So these proposals obviously have been rendered impractical or not been implemented. So how are your design interventions in the precinct more practical as opposed to these existing proposals, sir?
So what I did was I added that solution and I added my solution in that. So I haven't excluded that government proposals. So for example, there is a road widening or an nala widening. I did that, but I developed the edge also as a communal space or everything. So I have not excluded the government proposals. That's what I asked.
So my question is for Harsh. So your research was very where focused. So like you knew exactly which place and where and the typology of what you were going to focus on. So was the information when you were the data when you were looking for it, was it very narrowed down, as in were you able to easily find it, or what other methodologies did you apply to reach that quantum of research?
So in the projects like infrastructure, so in my case, it was a larger research kind of a thing, wherein I have to personally narrow down to these 3 stations, because even my guide and other faculty used to tell me that documenting each and every station is not possible. So what I did was I tried to document those stations which are highly complex and have a different specifications from the other 2 stations. So that's what I did. But talking about the information, I try to contact with the government bodies like MMID and everything, and then try to gain much more information from them also. That's what I was.
Thanks. Also, I have a question for Manasvi. So, because you were looking at co-living, there is also an aspect of understanding how much space a person requires. So, when you were looking at design, how did you make those decisions?
So what I did was, in my case studies, I did the entire planning, and I sort of looked at how how much space basically a person requires. You still have the documents which are available online, where you could actually find out that how much space a person requires to live alone in a particular room. So therefore, that is how we derive to how much space allocation can be given to a particular woman within the hostels.
Also, in addition to that, because it is co-living, you are also bound to interact with
Yeah.
people. So how do you also?
So what I did was I tried to within the internal planning itself, I tried to bring say 2 beds in such a way that it provides it provides privacy, but then when they get up from their space and move around within the room itself, they have this sort of setup, say a bed hub or something like that within the room, where they could actually communicate with each other. And also outside the room, the communal passage which I said, within that passage itself, I created this several pods within the passage itself, where these women could actually sit and have their leisure time, or spend their evening having a sip of tea.
Hi, Mansi. I have one question. It is a very broad question. So, in comparison to your peers, the scale of the project was very limited from a very initial period of time. And so, I wanted to ask in particular how, like, the difference between the scale of the project from your peers, and how did you deal with that, or the problems or the parameters you laid for yourself to detail, because probably it paved the way for a lot of detailed things to include. So what were the problems faced and what were the solutions to it?
So I was clear in my head that from the beginning of my thesis itself, that I don't want to do something on a master planning level, but I want to deal with something that is that is on a micro level, but it brings a change to whatever the current living setup is. So it didn't bother me really that everyone has such big sites and such big proposals, but I was focused on to even in my design, even though the site was very small, but the building was a high-rise building. So on each floor, I had to deal with these different spaces, and not every floor was repetitive. There were differences in almost every alternate floor. So this is how I dealt with say designing, and this is where I had a scope of designing within the building itself, rather than spreading horizontally. I had a scope to go vertical and design.
Thank you.
Isha, just to expand on that, your topic, your understanding, don't compare. Rule number 1. Don't ever compare with what your peers are doing. Any more questions? So we break for lunch and we come back at 1:45.
Welcome.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Rasika Kharvatkar, and I am here to share my experience about how my thesis dissertation was. So my topic was metamorphosis of memory, decoding the dynamics of spatial perception. Yeah, so how a brain functions and how we perceive spaces has been always kind of a topic of fascination for me. So what this topic for me to take up for my dissertation were like impact on us as human beings. Also some places, even if like we don't visit it often, still we have kind of an attachment to it due to some of the events that have happened there or some memories that we have basically. So from that, I derived my topic, which was memory in architecture or the metamorphosis of memory. So my scope of study was basically these three factors: memory, space and time, and how interconnected they are to each other. So the first part of my research was about researching about what memory exactly is. So by the dictionary definition, it is the ability to remember information, experiences and people. Also, memory as a concept has a very scientific backing to it. But since I was designing as an architect, I had to limit it to the architectural scope of memory. So the three important, like I categorized memory into three parts. One was individual memory, situational memory and collective memory. So individual memory mostly talks about a very personalized aspect of memory which can differ from person to person. For example, a space which we kind of connected to through our childhood can be something that is a part of an individual memory for a person. The second part was the situational memory, which is more of a short-term memory, which is kind of like remembering someone's phone number. That is a situational memory. And the collective memory, which was the major focus, which I proceeded further to design for my design. So me and my guide is architect Meghna Patil. So we always had a discussion about this specific childhood memory that I had, where we as a family used to visit our grandparents' home on every weekend. And that particular house, even though it was very small with just a kitchen and a room attached to it, in a very humble neighborhood, it had a very special place in my heart. So that was something that triggered me to take this topic. Also, when we talk about collective memory, it is more about on a city level, wherein people of the city or the events or the places, the festivals or the culture of the entire city actually derive what the collective memory is about for that city. Then also proceeding further, since like my topic was very kind of started with a philosophical take, I had to study a lot of theories by different architects. So one of it was like I compared these two theories. One was the Aldo Rossi's memory and architecture, wherein he talks about how a city itself is a collective memory for its people. He goes back to the concept of locus or a loci. So locus or a loci are specific points in the city where people attach their memories to. And the second theory that I kind of studied was the Kevin Lynch's theory of imageability of the city, wherein he gave the 5 elements which define a city and how those elements help us to actually have an image of the city in our minds. So also after studying these two theories, I kind of concluded how the architectural aspect of memory comes into picture and how collective memory can transform into architectural memory. So the second part of my study was about space, or more of an architectural aspect to it. So the memories that we connect to spaces are mostly due to the experiences that we have with it. And the major factor that helps in having those experiences are our human senses. So wherein it could be visual, it could be oral, it could be olfactory, it could be the scale and proportion of the building, the materiality, textures, etc. So wherein the concept of phenomenology comes into picture, which talks about basically all these aspects. Also, when we talk about architecture, what makes it like a good architectural project are the user group or the people that use the space. So, the human emotions also become an important factor of studying about when we come to study about the experiences in architecture. So, wherein a space can leave a good or a bad impression on a person, and also some spaces help are kind of a medium for us to express to express our vulnerability, and also it curves in healing. Also, there is also a sense of home that is attached to most of the spaces, so which in turn also helps us to derive the spatial perception of the space, and also it transforms into the spatial memory of the space. So this was the second part wherein I talked about mostly about the architectural part of the study, and the last part, which actually acts as a catalyst between this memory and space, is time, wherein with the passage of time, architecture evolves and memory is a catalyst to it. So for example, in this picture, the Mumbai CST station, wherein this is the old photograph, which was the memory, and this is the newer version of it, which is a space, and with the passage of time, it kind of evolves. So there is an evolution factor in it. So the case study is that till this point, I am actually only researching about the philosophical part of it, wherein I actually don't have any design typology which I am going to take forward as a design proposal for my semester 10. So the case studies were also of different scales and different forms of architecture. So for example, the Dadar Parsi colony, wherein I went through the Bombay precincts to sprawl by Kamu Iyer, wherein he defines how the Dadar Parsi colony, he used to stay there in his childhood, and how after he shifted to the Hindu colony, he kind of compared both these neighborhoods, and how he remembers Dadar Parsi colony as a core memory of his childhood. And the second case study was of Girgaon, Mumbai. Now Girgaon was one of the 7 islands of Mumbai, and so these are some of the, like I said, by the theory of Aldo Rossi, these were some of the loci of the city, which is the Kalpa Devi Mandir, the Royal Opera House, the Churni Road Station, and Girgaon Chowpatty, which have been evolved over time. So after studying all the 3 factors, I kind of jotted down all the concepts that I learned in the memory, space and time spectrum, and how they are interrelated to each other. And the ones that I highlighted were the main formed the main basis of how I took the design forward. So when I came to the selection of site, now the site selection criteria was basically for the place to have a very strong cultural and historical significance, it to be in an urban setting, because since I was considering Mumbai itself, also it should have a notion of collective memory attached to it, and also it has to have a distinct identity within the precinct that it exists in. So my design intent was to retain the identity of the space by the help of community development, since it will have a community of its own, and then also looking into how these communities interact with each other. Now the sites that I had shortlisted are of if I would have considered any of these, the design proposal would have been different for every site. It is not a specific building typology that I would have designed. So for example, the first was the Gateway of India precinct. Now Gateway of India being a monument in itself and having a heritage quality to it, the design proposal would have been more subtle and not overpowering the monument that it has, and actually paying respect to the memory of the monument. The Bhadra Fort precinct also has 2 monuments in a central axis. So the axis actually would have become my the scope for design proposal. The third was the Plaza Cinema Theatre,
which was my final site. So the Plaza Cinema Theatre has a very unique identity in terms of the precinct it is in. So the other as a precinct has very varied communities, and also the site Plaza Cinema, since it is nearby the railway station and connects major roads of the other, this theatre was a important structure in the precinct itself. And the last one was the Horniman Circle Flora Fountain precinct, wherein the design proposal would have been for the Falagoda festival that happens in the precinct. So how I chose Plaza Cinema Theatre is again going back to the theories that I learned. So one was the Alborosi theory, wherein Plaza, since cinema as a culture in Mumbai is kind of very rich, and also most of the since the film industry also is in Mumbai, so Plaza Cinema Theatre was a main highlighting factor for majorly the Marathi movie industry, for them to release their movies or celebrate their movies here. So that individual memory kind of is to the cinema watching experience for individuals. The collective memory aspect lies in the context of the entire building. The building itself becomes the locus for the Dadar precinct, and the city Dadar itself has a character of its own. I also studied it in the terms of the Kevin Lynch theory, wherein I kind of marked all the paths, edges, nodes and landmarks for the entire precinct, and this triangle actually is my site. How these will help me for designing Plaza Cinema Theatre. Also, the major factor one of the factors that were considered for Plaza Cinema Theatre were the 1993 bomb blast. So before the bomb blast, the theatre had a very unique architectural quality in terms of the facade, which had these caricatures and murals on it. But after the bomb blast, after it was refurbished, as you can see, this is the newer building. So it kind of lost its architectural relevance, but the functional memory of the theatre remained the same. Now also, this theatre had been a single screen theatre, which doesn't work in today's modern cinema culture. So that is why it kind of lost its relevance. So the main important site parameters that I considered were the access points, since this NC Kekar road was the main road which connects the Tirak Bridge and which in turn connects to the railway station which is in the vicinity. Then the climatic parameters, the vantage point, since this frontage of the site was the only point wherein there was a vantage, because all the surrounding areas were densely residential areas. And the last was the existing theatre. Now, when I was considering the design, initially I was very confused whether I should consider the existing building or not, or the functioning of the existing building or not. Or because my topic was more about experiences and not a problem-solving topic. So, I would have discussions with Meghna ma'am about the same. And her suggestion was to not consider the existing building or its function in any way, and actually looking at it as a newer site altogether and designing for the same. Also, the main factor was the street connection it had, and how people from the nearby neighborhoods could perceive the theatre. So when I was zoning the entire site, I kind of divided the site into two halves, wherein this happens to be my main structure and this happens to be the landscape area. Now this was purposely done because if you see the older building, it did not have any visual connect to the commuters that cross daily from the street, and this street happens to be very important for the people accessing the railway station daily. So the landscape area kind of was kind of served as a visual connect to the main structure that happened at the rear end. If you see now, theater as a architectural design has a very specific requirement and functions that it needs to follow. So mostly the ground floor area that I designed was kept open and more permeable, wherein the floors above had the main screens. Now, as I said, my design was not only just to retain the character of Plaza Cinema Theatre, but also to look into how the modern cinema culture is. So I kind of created these landscape areas on the ground floor for users to actually navigate through the entire space and decide how they can access the entire building. It could be from the main entrance, from these were the installation spaces. So people could actually navigate through the installations and then enter the building. They could directly access the waiting area, or they could actually sit around the courtyard and then access the building. Also, this entire part was landscape staircases which directly connected to the first floor. Now on this particular floor, I did not have any theatre as such, only public spaces that catered to the users. These these staircases also kind of merge into forming a open amphitheatre, and the staircases also lead to a smaller cafe that happens. Also, multifunctionality of spaces was one such aspect that I considered. So the terraces, the amphitheatre, and even the main screens of the theatres could be used for multiple functions. This was the entire massing of my building, wherein the main screens happen on the floors above, and the ground floor is simply for public interaction. Also, the courtyard in the front. Yeah. So the courtyard that I kind of proposed, since this theatre was very famous for the Marathi movie industry, I kind of tried to cater to that user group as well. And this state theatre was founded by V. Shantaram, who was actor and director of the Marathi movie industry. So he kind of had very varied colors to his personality. So the Gulmohar tree that happens in the courtyard, so I kind of purposely gave Gulmohar tree as in the courtyard for its seasonal quality, since it changes colors through the season, so it kind of acts like a memorial for him. Yeah, so this was the entire section which cuts through the landscape staircases, the memorial, the actual screens, and the language of the entire like the architectural skill was to actually stand out in the densely populated Darwin region, for it to become an identity again for the entire precinct. Also, the acoustics were an important part to be considered for the theatre. So these were some of the details for the same. So thank you. This was my design. So basically, I concluded by saying that how memory of how a space can evolve through time, but memory still acts as a catalyst for its evolution, and it also becomes a basis for how we perceive architecture in the future. So my design was more of a conscious and sensitive approach to designing. It wasn't like more technical, it did not have a lot of technical aspect to it, but more of a philosophical aspect to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rasika. Moving on to Tanvi Bonde.
Good afternoon. I'm Tanvi Bonde and I'm here to present my thesis, Deciphering Abandoned Spaces, Unraveling its Impact on the Urban Fabric, under the guidance of my guide, architect Arun Pizzardo sir. So I started my my thesis with when I found every city has its abandoned spaces that are not that are being used that are not being used, spaces like vacant plots, derelict structures, or forgotten areas. These places can show the city's past either in the form of derelict structures or ruined structures, but they can also be beautiful spots where they have lost its identity over time. So they used to be important, but now they are forgotten and stuck and frozen and stuck in the time period. So often various choices in the politics or environmental decisions lead in the creation of these abandoned spaces. Abandoned spaces includes vacant homes, derelict houses, factories that are not working, malls with no activities, and other empty structures. So I began my research with asking some questions. These questions helped me to structure my thesis. Research process. So those questions were: how can we and cities make use of these abandoned spaces? What is the relevance of these abandoned spaces? And what happens with those abandoned spaces later? So why do we need to look at this issue of this abandoned space? So abandoned space are more common in and a complex problem in Mumbai like city. So when damaged properties are not reused, new properties are being built in some other part of the city. So it affects both the quality of life and the spatial layout of the city, the overall layout of the city. So abandoned buildings also have implications on quality of life and its failure in the real estate market, because near abandoned spaces the property rates are a bit lower, and there are also a lot of issues created by this abandoned spaces, such as it is a criminal magnet, and the antisocial activities also happened in those abandoned structures. So before going ahead, I just want to make myself clear with what the term abandoned is. What are abandoned spaces? So the word abandoned space draws up the idea of a structure that is vacant and in very serious condition, bricked up or maybe littered and defaced with graffiti. So abandoned spaces are normally perceived as areas that no longer holds a function that was assigned to it and now lies vacant in the course of time. So next was, how can I make myself clear with what is abandoned space and urban void? So these two terms are different from each other. Abandoned spaces have a function assigned to it, and because earlier they had a function assigned to it, and later because of some reasons they got abandoned. But urban voids are empty spaces or neglected spaces that are created when 2 or 3 projects built up, and the in-between space is called a vacant space, like a urban void. An example here is the space under the bridge or highway. So this was the difference that I wanted to make clear at the start of the research. So abandoned spaces can be broadly classified as at the macro level locating and micro level locating. So macro level locating of abandoned spaces includes abandonment of villages, forts, and big, like large scale structure. And micro level abandonment of structure includes small scale abandonment like a church or a small building, or for the matter, the mills. So moving forward, these examples were studied under various parameters and categories like its location, what were the reason of abandonment, what were its cultural value that was associated with it before, and then what was its previous use, then its identification, how can we identify of that abandoned property, the time period and category if any. So later, moving ahead, different attributes contribute to these abandoned spaces that needs to be de-layered in order to understand abandoned spaces in more depth, and what goes behind in creating this creation of these abandoned spaces that are like not we don't want it. So the state of these abandoned space defines the nature of the abandoned space majorly. It correlates to the definition of abandonment in itself. And so now the question arises, why do places and structures get abandoned? So there are many factors and conditions responsible for the abandonment of places and structures. The places get abandoned due to natural calamity, due to natural resource depletion, due to economic change, due to economic conditions and environmental changes. And somewhere paranormal beliefs, and some structures are unsafe for habitation, etc. So these factors and conditions later help me to categorize this into typology under two main categorizations, that is man-made abandoned space based on man-made activities and abandoned space based on natural activities. Also, the study of delayering includes why abandoned spaces decay quickly, and why these spaces create so much issues in the neighborhood and the surrounding. So I took Mumbai as a case example, where for critically analyzing these spaces under different aspects related to different aspects. So why I chose Mumbai? Because Mumbai is a very developed city, and it has a major role in the growth of capitalism, and it also has a massive impact on economy. People travel to Mumbai in search of jobs and better opportunities and living conditions. So because of these reasons, Mumbai, the space demand for Mumbai increases, and in result the land prices also increases. So this also raises one important question, like how can such a developed city have so many abandoned spaces where each square inch of land has is so valuable. So I located and marked some of the abandoned properties and spaces in Mumbai, wherein these spaces were then categorized into different categories that were mentioned earlier, due to economic issues, or due to man-made some reasons, and etc. So from these locations, I picked up 2-3 spaces to study in depth. So those were the abandoned warehouses and godowns at Dockyard, and the mill land and the government colony in Bandra. So these were studied in terms of its history, its importance of the location and the area, the reason why they were abandoned, its land use policy, the ownership status, the cultural asset and the cultural value the land has, and what was the take of people on these abandoned spaces, the bylaws, the potential that these spaces have if they were redesigned, and what were the present condition and the impact of that on the surrounding and people, and the movement pattern and some social life around the abandoned space. So to question the future of architecture is really important, because growing city always leaves behind some or the other loopholes in some other way. So the answer to this question lies in the process of how these abandoned spaces are created in the first place. And if we took care of these abandoned spaces, if we took care of those factors that create these abandoned spaces, we can try to improve. We can try to lessen the intensity of the issue. So. What if if the factors overrule the space, the cycle of abandonment will go on and on forever. So in spite of the solutions provided. So whatever I did the research till now, it said that the spaces and the properties get abandoned because of the function that dies out in that space. So what if we don't allow that function to die out, and what if we keep the spaces flexible to accommodate the changing needs and activities? And will this flexibility help in not getting the spaces not getting abandoned? So these questions were helped me to move ahead in the design process. So for site selection, the site parameters were the site parameters were based on the research that was done till now. So first one was the place needs to be abandoned for more than 10 to 20 years. So this also became my scope wherein I limited the number of I sorted out the abandoned spaces based on what can be the year of abandonment was there. So also the reason of abandonment becomes important in the design process ahead, and the impact on the surrounding area becomes important in the site parameter, and its impact on the people, and it should have a design potential. So I had three site options. First one was Digvijay Textile Mills in Lal Bagh. Second one was Asin Private Limited Company in Thane. And then the third one was this abandoned ice factory in Mulund West. So the final site was ice factory in Mulund West because it catered to all the site parameters for site selection. It was an abandoned ice factory that was shut down in 1980s. The reason for abandonment was it was shut down due to economical issues. The site it lies in a very bad condition. It has become a dumping ground, and because of the dumping ground, there are people who raise complaints about the health issues and etc. So that impact on people, at that point of impact on people it has. So moving ahead, these are the existing site photos, which shows the bad condition of the site. The designing. So the designing was to make the site functional, and question the site and utilize the site to its full potential by incorporating activities that was site based, that was related to the site context, and which would again cater to the needs of the surrounding people and the community. So the methodology adopted for this was what can be the solution to turn this abandoned state of the property. So I had a discussion with my guide where we went into all the three steps that we had. So I also researched into the adaptive reuse approach and the partially adaptive reuse approach. But later what was found was the adaptive reuse and or putting some technologies on the using some technology on the older structure compromises the flexibility of the spaces that was created. So it was decided that for proposing of new activities altogether with the idea of flexible spaces and inclusion of different space characteristics will go. So so this is a diagram which shows site context around the site. It has on one side it has public spaces high-rise residential buildings. There's some amenities like mandir, garden, and some public utility areas. And on others, it lies in a very developed area. And other side, it has a whole patch of land was covered with slums. So the user group analysis was done by frequently visiting the site and asking the people different type based on the activities that they did, and later these user group analysis and the activity analysis helped me to proceed ahead in the design. So that was kept in mind while giving those activities and spaces for them. So the design proceeds in 3 phases, because the first phase has a incorporation of several activities that are site-based first. So it's a community center in the first phase that caters to community needs and spaces related to that. So in second phase, it goes through, so to deal with this flexible nature, the design proceeds ahead into 3 phases. So the phase 2 proceeds ahead into the day and night transitions that occur to the activities, and the phase 3 has the commercial development above the building, and also the spaces that are below the commercial block has changed based on the site context, changing site context over a few years of time. So the activity mapping that was that includes several activities such as cattle, the fodder given to the cattle, the cows, and service vehicles parked on the road edges, and so these all were incorporated into the design, and the zoning was done based on it. So there were these retail stores and eatery shops on the ground floor, and the skill development center for the slum people, so that they can be easily accessible from the ground floor. And the whole first floor was given for the women empowerment zone. The second floor was given for the study area and e-library, basically the study areas. And the third floor was the daycare facility. So the activities were based on considering different communities that are there, and it acts like a linkage between the different communities. So these are some of the views that shows the connection between different spaces. So this is the phase 1 design, in which the spaces on the ground floor are related to community center, so such as skill development center, and the retail stores and the eatery shops, and a food court in between overlooking. So there are multiple entry points so that both the communities, nearby communities, can access it. And later these changes throughout the day, like at night, different activities can be held there. So these spaces are kept flexible so as to accommodate the changing activities. And in phase 3, these activities change according to the changing site context after a few years. So the phases were designed as per the keeping in mind the different site contexts at different period of time. So these are some of the views from phase 1 and phase 2, which shows the space solution. And this is a view from the first phase, which shows accessibility through different adjacent roads, and thus overlooking spaces from different area. And yeah, so I would like to conclude with saying that the flexibility that I was talking about, I tried to take it forward for this site. Like it was a site-based approach that was being taken here. So thank you.
Thank you, Tanvi. And we move on to the last person for today's session. We have Saket with us.
Hello. So before starting my presentation, I want to ask one question to the current fifth year and fourth year that what is the price of common salt that we use in everyday life? मतलब per kg. Yes.
Anybody else?
Yeah, we will talk about this. Slides. Yeah. So in India, flourishing and revenue earning salt industry, the primary producer of the salt making peoples, agarias, are living under highly exploitative and subhuman working conditions. So after China and USA, India lies third largest salt industry in the world, and 80% of the salt comes from Gujarat, where agarias produce maximum out of almost around 40%. Yeah, and I have one more question yeah. What comes in your mind when you heard Run of Kutch? Ranotsav, right? But the topic, whatever I am doing here is totally it's a different story. Yeah. Yeah. So there is a two-part. One is the great in Gujarat. There is a two-part. One is the great run and one is the little run. So whatever you think about the great run, Ranotsav is actually in the great run, and the little run has a total different story. If you see in the great run, you will see the white desert and Ranotsav, and there are many large industries, agrochemical industries, and on the other side, in the little run of Kutch, you will see only the salt industry at the fringes of that area, and inside that people living around 50,000, more than 50,000 people living around. That is approx 5 to 6,000 families who produce salt. Yeah. And this run of Kutch is actually for 8 months it's a complete dry desert, and for 4 months it submerged into water by the backwater of Arabian Sea and streams and rivers from India. Yeah. Yeah. So during the when British improvised salt taxes, because of the Dandi March happened. Because of the Dandi March happened, the salt taxes have been removed, and every Agaria family has given around 10 acres of land for salt production. And after that, on 12th Jan 1973, the whole little run of Kutch was surveyed and given as the no development zone and because of the wildlife sanctuary. And so the Agarias are in this area from around centuries, like 6 centuries, and all the working traditions and techniques, rituals, and everything was carried away from from the ancestors. Now these people, when the water level, for 8 months they work over there, and when the water level rises, they for the 4 months they just travel back to their houses. From the fringes, if we see from the fringes, their houses are around 50 kilometers away from each other, and they are spread along 109 villages. And when these people are here, their farms are almost 200 meters to 200 kilometers away from each other. yeah, during the migration, when they left, these are the images you can see the leftovers from their main house or in the fringes, and the down जो नीचे जो भी images है वो सब जिस टाइम वो रन छोड़ के जाते हैं उस टाइम के सारे images है, जैसे कि the first one is the water collecting area, जहाँ पे उन लोगों को अगर एक्स्ट्रा वाटर चाहिए तो ऐसा ड्रम ऐड कर देंगे उसके अंदर, एंड उसके बाद में दे यू जब वाटर जब भी वापस आएगा तभी उन लोगों को पूरा बेसिकली ड्रम फिलअप हो जाएगा और एक्स्ट्रा वाटर मिलेगा, एंड दिस आर अनदर थिंग्स which are leftovers, and you can see the fourth image. It's actually the machine. The run is very large, so they can't afford to take the heavy machines here and there. So what they do, they cover in the plastic wrap and dug it inside the land, and then when they come back, they just open it and reuse it. Yeah. So I have one more question. So what are the houses made for? मतलब वो अपने लिए इसके क्या reason की वजह से मतलब shelter, right, to protect us, but there is a total different story over there. As you can see the top image, तो जब भी वहाँ पे cyclones और winds, heavy winds आते हैं, so the Agaria family used to come out and they protect their houses by holding them, because most of the time their houses just blew away. Yeah. And during the summers, the temperature rises around 50 degrees Celsius. So it feels like the burning furnace inside this type of houses. So I'm trying to make a new model for this house. And it is said that 90% of the toilets are made in Gujarat. But what about the rest? So this percentage can be increased by some 2-3 by giving them the toilets. The problem is, as you can see in this image, the woman and the girl walking with the khatia, right? So they are going. If they want to excrete, they just carry a bed far away from their dwellings and cover the with one side and excrete. So this, as you can see, this system is even worse than that of urban slums such as Dharavi, who has such a designated spaces. So even in the menstrual time, they don't have even proper designated toilets to clean or wash. Here is the answer actually. So per Agaria family made 1,000 to 2,000 tons of salt every in 8 months, but only they get around, for 1 kg of salt they get around for 1 ton of salt they get around 80 rupees, which is about less than 1%. So because of this they don't have enough money to spend, and so the children and education problem. There are 39 schools running by the NGOs, children, and there is a problem with the medical facility. Only one van is there who cover around 5,000 kilometers in a week. Yeah, and the water issues. Actually, there is one more question. Okay, how much water does comes in your home?
How many liters of
Liters
water
of
come
water.
in your home?
But how much liters of water come in your home? It's around 500 to 1000 liters, I guess, yes. But these people only get 1000 to 1500 liters for 20 days. So even if they want to take the bath, even if they want to take the bath, they have to go back to their dwellings and take the bath in 20 or 30 days as well. Yeah. So you all have heard the Anand one, right? So these are the Adivasis who don't even know structures क्या होता है, medical facilities क्या होती है, फिर everything मतलब उन लोग choose the Wi-Fi दे और every मतलब मैंने वहाँ पे field visit पे जाके जो भी questions किए, everyone knows कि ये कौन है, क्या क्यों आया है, मतलब मेरे को उन लोगों को ज़्यादा बताने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ती. But the problem is logistics. उन लोगों तक कोई भी चीज़ें अभी तक अच्छी तरीके से पहुँच ही नहीं रही है. Some great leaders have said that war cannot win without the logistics. Like अगर हम लोग तक अगर कोई भी अपन वॉर लड़ रहे हैं तो सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ है अगर अपने पास गन्स और सब कुछ रहेगा तो फिर वी कैन एंड अप वेल. बट द प्रॉब्लम इज वहाँ तक अगर इफ आई कंपेयर विद द अगारियाज उन लोग के वहाँ तक कोई भी चीज़ पहुँच नहीं, जिसकी वजह से दे आर मोर सफरिंग फ्रॉम दिस ऑल थिंग्स. So my vision is to the Agarya's life and composed by many social economical problems. So every single aspect is not carefully looked after by the authorities. Although a few architectural interventions may help not only in elevating the status and quality of their lives, but create a domino effect that will evolve the overall way to this procurement of salt. So my design program is on two sides. One is site A inside the desert, and one is site B outside the desert. So as you can see, the whole little run of Kutch is very large. It's around 5,000 square kilometers. So there are and all the areas are marked in pink color. So you can see मतलब ऐसे बहुत सारी sites. तो each and every site I can't develop. So what I have done, every site is a phase-wise development. So I have selected one site. According to that, जो भी problems आएगी, जो भी situations create होगी, उसको देख के next site develop होगी. So and the site I have selected is by the government project. So my idea for the community center is to create interactive spaces among the Agarians. So this is why because for 8 months they used to live very isolated from each other. So this community helps them to interact easily. And the second idea is for the housing. So you all know the streets of Kutch. So every junction is a Y-shaped branch. So same way I applied to this into my site. So I've divided my site into 3. The upper portion is the salt collection area, and with the community center, and around that there are the housing. And this section shows the interconnected spaces between them. Yeah. So I have given the spaces like an NGO office, bank of cooperative bank, then medical health, canteen, community space, and a housing. Sorry, portable space for housing. Yeah. And around that this is a hub. Yeah. So this is another section. Shows the cut from the NGO office, and these are the toilet. Actually, the site was under the earthquake prone area. So I have to consider the structures for this, that it should be earthquake resistant. And these are the other sections. Yeah. And this one is the housing. So the design idea for the modular housing is the bhungas. So these are the typical structure of Kutch. So I am recreating this structure into the desert so that it can withstand the winds and high velocity winds. Yeah. So see here. So this is how I created by taking the same form. Actually, the idea behind this is these bhungas are actually earthquake resistant structures, but because of the circular shape, it can resist wind easily. Yeah, and so I have created this frame-like structure, which is with the pin joint. And this can be covered up with tarpaulin sheet, and this pin joint will be with the bolts. And this is the reciprocal loop, which is connected to that wheel, and this is directly tangent to the frame structure. And this is the temporary foundation, which can be used inside the desert and remove back, as the site was no development zone, so the concrete we can't use the concrete. And this is another detail which is made of concrete. So this will be on their main houses. So whoever don't have houses, they can easily shift their structures. And yeah. So another thing is the toilet. So these are the simple details of the toilet, which is made according to the desert. So I use the bio toilet because it's again a no development zone. So there is a problem of water. So whatever water is removed, उसमें से जो बाहर निकलेगा, they can use it again over there. Is that? Yeah, and this is the actually I have met with the Agaria's Heat Rakshak Manch, who is with the NGO, and they gave me quotation to make the houses and design the houses in just 20,000. So this is the quotation. They can this structure they can make in within 20,000. Yeah. And this is the another quotation for this one is for the PVC pipes. And I have met with the Agaria's Heat Rakshak Manch and presented my thesis, and they have approved it, and the work will be start around September 1st.
Thank you so much, Saket. That was an awesome event, like you promised. And the questions were the best part of the entire event. Thank you. Questions from the audience? So just to ensure there's no confusion of names, we had Rasika and Tanvi and Saket presenting. So questions. The lunch break was a bad idea?
So my question is for Tanvi. So like you were talking about abandoned spaces, which were mills and all such major places. So since these places are abandoned, what difficulties did you face while documenting or searching the details about these sites since they are abandoned?
So first difficulty was there is not much information about these abandoned spaces online. So I have to talk to people to have their opinion on that abandoned space, or maybe visit that abandoned space and then do some research about it like on online. So that was.
Thank you.
Questions?
Hello, my question is for Rasika. So when you were talking about your research part, it was very memory oriented, and that is something which depends from person to person. It can be very subjective. So how did you come to a conclusion that this can be unanimous for all?
Yeah, so like the Plaza Cinema Theatre, that was my site. It was basically dependent on the context around. So since there is a specific community that lives around Plaza Cinema Theatre who have a specific memory attached with the theatre itself. Also, it being a public space, it has to have some, like everybody has to have some memory connected to the theatre as a typology of a building. So that was one idea of taking up, like you said, it is very subjective to person, but I had to narrow it down to one side. So that was it.
So I have a question for Tanvi. So you completely you repurposed your site, but then I want to know how much of it did you salvage, and how did you what kind of research went into understanding what are the salvageable research?
So when I went to the site, I did a documentation of the existing structure that was there, and after doing that, I understood that the structure was really in a very bad condition, and it cannot be used or or it cannot be reused for having different activities. So also the first thing that I had in my concept was flexibility. So if I did an adaptive reuse of that old structure, so it would have compromised on some or some of the other areas. So the best way was to build to propose a new structure, but coming to your question, I used some of the materials in debris, and some of it in reuse of tiles that were there, so that materials were used.
No more questions for today? Okay, thank you. Very big thank you to all 9 presenters for today. Before we conclude with the certificates of participation, small request. Can the current 5th year and 4th year please make the most of the panels that have been pinned up? Okay. Also requesting the presenters for today a little more of your time. If you could stand with your panels, so whatever questions they have regarding design which was not discussed so much in detail today, they can clarify with you at your panels. Okay. Thank you. Mandar sir, requesting you to please join us. Certificates, Architect Harsh Salvi.
Thank you.